Hi, I'm Joey Lott, and this is a video in the series that I call Ask Consciousness Anything. And the purpose of this series is to invite you to discover directly for yourself the truth of who you are. And the reason this matters is because when you discover the truth of who you are in your direct experience, not as a thought, not as a belief, but truly, directly, intimately knowing the truth of who you are as consciousness, this ends the war within. This is a total transformation. This is the beginning of true living peace in your life. And that matters. That matters to all of us. And that's really, truly what's possible. And that's what I'm inviting you to by inquiring directly into your own experience. So, as always, I have a question submitted by a viewer, and I addressed that in the video today. It's right over here. It says, "It's very clear to me that my true self has always been the same since childhood. However, it doesn't feel particularly liberating. It makes me feel rather strange and scared and lonely. It also seems very much like an activity of the mind. I have a clear picture of myself at the age of 2 looking at my baby brother's cot. Or else I remind myself of it for a moment, but immediately get caught up again in thought and suffering. I have a sense of tension in my head, thinking about it and trying to conjure it up." Just asking for your thoughts on this. So a lot there. We'll take a look at it piece by piece. So it's very clear to me that my true self has always been the same since childhood. So really, then there's no need to complicate it more than that. In fact, that's already too complicated. So that's a useful pointer to recognize that the truth of who you are remains unchanged over time. So that's a really good clue. And then the invitation is to remain with that, because it's in the direct experience of yourself. It's in the conscious remaining as awareness that you discover the liberation of this. Then it says, "However, it doesn't feel particularly liberating." And that's right. That's right. This is usually a big hang-up, is that we turn to mind to tell us what the feeling means. And so when we have a feeling and then we turn to the mind and we say, "Mind, is this a liberating feeling?" And mind says, "No, this is not a liberating feeling." Then we say, well, then I guess something's not right, because it should be a liberating feeling and mind's telling me it's not a liberating feeling. But if you inquire directly, always, freshly now, what you discover again and again and again is that feeling has no meaning whatsoever. That the meaning is given by mind, but that the feeling itself is simply feeling. Right? You can actually tune in right now and notice that whatever's happening right now, it doesn't have to be particularly intense or otherwise, but whatever the sensation or feeling is now, you can notice that prior to the thought's commentary about it, that there is no meaning intrinsic in this feeling. And so to believe the mind's story that this feeling is not liberating, or that this is not a liberating feeling, is to be living from confusion rather than living from clarity, because clarity, clearly, is that feeling is feeling. And the story told about the feeling is based on past conditioning, and it comes from the mind. It says, "It makes me feel rather strange and scared and lonely." So we could apply the same there, but we won't. Because we can also see that this interpretation of strange and scared and lonely is designed to utilize fear to dissuade you from really remaining with the direct experience. And this is not because the mind is malicious or it is your enemy. That is not true. The mind is not your enemy. It is absolutely perfect. It's not your enemy. If you have any relationship with the mind, let it be a relationship of love. But we can see that this is very predictable, that the mind lives based on the past conditioning, and it lives in fear largely. And so it's not a surprise that anytime there's any newness The mind, if we turn to the mind to tell us about it, it will tell us something negative, something fearful, and it will suggest very firmly that we stay away from whatever that is. So really, the mind's labels about the feeling are unreliable at best, and often are pointing us in exactly the wrong direction, because it says to run, to make effort, to try to escape or avoid or change or fix, ultimately to protect yourself. And it says it also seems very much like an activity of the mind. Yes, you can see how clearly this gets twisted and distorted and co-opted by the mind, right? It's a split second later. And so if you're just aware of this, then you start to recognize that tendency to turn to mind. So the mind does its job perfectly. That's fine. But just notice your tendency to turn to mind to try to offer security or protection. And you can notice the folly of that, because if you really look carefully, you see that anytime you are looking, you are necessarily aware of yourself as awareness, but you overlook that by quickly turning to the content of thought to give you its commentary about what is, rather than just staying with the direct experience of what is. And it says, or else I remind myself of it for a moment, but immediately get caught up again in thought and suffering. Yes, that's right. So you can see that any kind of reminder easily is distorted. And this is one of the big mistakes, and one of the reasons why so many of our spiritual practices don't work, is because they're really just taking place in mind. It's just more mind stuff doing battle with more mind stuff, and so we're just at war. And what we want is peace, so we have to look to where peace is, and we have to remain with the peace rather than turning to mind. And you can see that instantaneously there's a recognition of who you are. And it's stated right from the beginning here. It says, it's very clear to me that my true self has always been the same since childhood. So you don't even need to make it any more complicated than that. You can notice that this sense of being right now that you are, that's your most intimate experience of yourself, this is changeless. This is totally trustworthy. And if you're willing to take my word for it so that you can really check it out for yourself. So it requires just the tiniest little bit of trust, the tiniest little bit of trust. Not a lot. I'm not asking for much. I'm saying it's the equivalent of when you were a child riding your bicycle and you had the courage just to take a hand off the handlebars for half a second. That kind of trust, very small trust. Just trust enough to inquire directly for yourself now and to find out, who are you now? What is here now? What is totally reliable now? And you will discover, as you do, that what is totally reliable is the effortlessness of being. It's already always given, that you cannot mess up. You cannot make a mistake here. There's no possibility of ever not being. You are. And so you can trust in that. Don't complicate it more than that. And then it says, I have a sense of tension in my head thinking about it and trying to conjure it up. Yeah. So that's wonderful. Then you can just see how unnecessary that is. Because if you have to make any effort, it's too much effort. What we're talking about is simply who you are. It's the truth of who you are. It's not who you need to maintain. It's not something you need to become. It's not something you need to work hard at. We're talking about what is already given, what is effortless, what has always been, always. Not sometimes, not most of the time, not 99% of the time, always. So if it's something that comes and goes, be willing to let go of that. And to really have to exercise that trust as a living inquiry. That's the important thing to understand, is that living inquiry is not about trying to get comfortable. Living inquiry is about an absolute commitment to truth, not to ideas about what might be, but an absolute commitment to the truth. It's about wanting more than anything else, wanting to know who you are, who you really truly are. And if you truly want that more than anything else, then everything becomes an opportunity for that. Everything offers you yourself. Everything offers you a deeper, truer recognition of who you are as pure consciousness, that which does not come and go. So every moment is clarifying that. Every moment is reflecting to you so that you can discover directly, intimately, in your own experience without making effort. So if you notice that you're conjuring up any effort, whether it's to focus or to try to get rid of tension, either way, just notice the trickery there and notice that it's really not necessary, that you can trust and be willing to let go of any unnecessary effort. And that does not mean that you should get rid of all tension. It just means get rid of, or not even get rid of, just be willing to let go of the unnecessary effort to protect yourself, to figure it out, to understand, to fix something, to get it right. Just be willing to be totally vulnerable in this moment and to really just see what is. Just what's here. In your most intimate experience of yourself. And this is freedom. This truly is freedom. It's not the mind's idea of freedom. It's not the feeling that the mind said would be the feeling of freedom. It's the direct revelation of freedom as it really is. It's the freedom that's so total, so inclusive, that nothing is excluded. Everything is allowed. You are fully allowed here in this freedom that you are. And that's absolutely possible for you, for everybody who's listening to this. There's no special requirements for this because really we're talking about just recognizing who you are. You don't have to work hard for this. In fact, the harder you work for it, the further away it seems. But the more vulnerable, the more open you are to just being rather than being what you think you're supposed to be. The more you're willing to allow your experience exactly as it is rather than trying to subtly manipulate the experience to fit into your idea of what acceptable experience is, the clearer this gets and the easier and more effortless your life seems to become, only because you're not making the unnecessary effort any longer trying to get rid of or get to or fix or defend or protect, but you're willing just to actually check it out moment to moment for yourself and find out for yourself what is true, who you really are now, not as an idea from the past, but right now, as a truly lived inquiry. And this really, I promise you, does change lives. This changes the life in a really magnificent, positive, profound way for everybody who's honestly willing to check it out for themselves. But this is not the sort of thing for people who just want some other thing to make themselves feel good or pretend like they're doing something. This is for people who really had enough of suffering and enough of seeking and enough of that whole trip of not knowing who you are. This is for people who are really ready to take responsibility for living awake, for choosing freedom moment to moment. And if that's you, you're in the right place. So as always, if you have a question that you would like to ask, you can go to joeylott.com/ask. That's JOEYLOTT.com/ask. And there's a form there where you can submit your question, and I do my best to respond to all of these by creating videos and posting them on YouTube and on Facebook. And if you are interested in learning about opportunities to get direct coaching from me or my current events, you can go to joeylott.com/now, NOW. Okay, see you next time. Bye for now.